Hey everybody, this is the fourth here, and in this video I wanted to introduce you to sidechain compression. Now, sidechain compression works the exact same way as normal compression, except for one very important thing. So if you haven't watched the video on normal compression yet, and you don't really have a solid idea of how the different parameters on a compressor work and what they do, I definitely recommend you go back and watch that video first, and then come back to this video. Because since the parameters all work the exact same way, I'm not really going to be covering how they work in this video. So the difference between sidechain compression and normal compression is where normal compression compresses the sound based on its own dynamics, sidechain compression compresses the sound based on the dynamics of a separate sidechain signal. And in other words, I mean a different sound in your mix. So this is a very common technique used in house music where you have this kind of kick pattern. And you want to help that kick come through and add a little bit of pumping to your track. So this is the example I'll be using in this video, but I'll also be mentioning a few other kind of different ways you might want to use sidechain compression as well at the end of this video. So here's the pattern that I have right now. And I want to sidechain the kind of saw lead sound to that kick to help the kick come through the mix more and give it a little bit of a pumping effect. And so how you set up a sidechain is going to pretty much depend on what digital audio workstation you're using. If you're not sure how to do it in your digital audio workstation, you can probably find out pretty quickly by either checking in the manual or looking it up. But in FL Studio, all you have to do is select the track that you want to use as the sidechain signal, and then right-click the send arrow to the track that you want sidechained, and select sidechain to this track. And now the kick will be a sidechain input to this saw lead sound mixer track. And once you have that done, you have to make sure that you're using the correct sidechain input. And since I only have one track going through this mixer track, it is really easy. I just select one. But sometimes if you have multiple tracks going through it, it might not be as straightforward, because now you see I have 2, 3, as well as 1. And so to select the appropriate track, what I do is I'll just take the threshold all the way down and play it. And you can see when I have the correct track selected, you can kind of see the sound coming through via these blue lines. And if I play it all crazy, you can see that it will show up on the Fruity limiter as well as this kind of display. So that's how you can kind of know you've selected the right track. And then you just want to bring the threshold back up to an appropriate level. So like I said at the beginning of this video, all of the parameters work the same exact way that they do when you're using compression normally. And the only difference is that instead of them reacting to the sound that you're playing in that mixer track, they are reacting to the sidechain signal, which in this case is this kick. But it could be anything, depending on what you are wanting to do with sidechaining. So you can see if I adjust this threshold, I want to apply some pretty decent amount of compression, so I'm going to put it pretty low. And you can see that all of this from the kick is above the threshold, and this is what will be affecting the saw lead sound. And then I can set the ratio to be whatever value I want. And you can see that instead of compressing the sound normally, it is compressing it based on that kick. So when the kick exceeds the threshold, it reduces the saw sound by the amount at which the ratio kind of tells it to do. So if I were compressing the kick with these same settings, the amount of gain reduction and the way in which that gain reduction is applied to the kick is applied to this saw sound. And you can hear if I turn off the kicks routing to the master, you'll hear just the saw sound being affected. And I can adjust the release if I want less of that pumping effect. Or if I want more of that pumping effect, I can increase it. And I can, of course, adjust the attack and the knee if I want to. In most cases, I haven't needed to adjust the gain, but you can if you need to. Perhaps if you have an extra long release time, you might have to. But yeah, that's pretty much how a sidechain compressor works. You can hear that if I kind of change the kick pattern, it will change the the sidechain pattern as well. So sidechaining is a very useful tool to help a couple different sounds relate differently to each other in your mix. In this example, you can hear that using sidechaining helps the kick cut through better and kind of causes the synth to duck under that kick and produce that pumping effect. But there are a ton of more subtle ways you can use sidechaining, primarily just to kind of help certain sounds come through your mix better. So I could do this with my drum track, and if I didn't quite want a very noticeable pumping effect like this, I could use much more subtle compressor settings and have it be a very transparent effect. And if I wanted my vocal to come through the mix more when it was playing with a main lead, maybe I wanted the lead to be really loud when the vocal wasn't playing, but when that vocal comes in, I might sidechain that lead to the vocal so that when the vocal plays, the lead is reduced some so that the vocal is heard better. And, the list of things you can do goes on and on. It really all just comes down to kind of what you want to do with it. If you're having trouble with certain sounds fighting in the mix, if you feel like your pad sound is too loud when other sounds are playing, but it's too quiet when it's on its own, you could use sidechaining for that. And really pretty much any time that you want a certain sound to be heard better over a different sound or a different set of sounds. You can definitely look up specific sidechaining techniques. The most popular one is definitely to sidechain your bass with your kick and also, your synth sounds with your drum pattern. But there are plenty of other more subtle uses of sidechain that can be very helpful as well. So I definitely encourage you to keep it in mind, play around with it, and possibly look up some techniques. But just as always, take all techniques with like a grain of salt, kind of decide whether or not they fit into your production, and always try to figure out why people recommend those kind of techniques. But hopefully this video is helpful. Hopefully you have a better idea of how sidechaining works, and a little bit of an idea of how you can incorporate it into your mixing process. And like I said at the beginning of the video, if you don't know how the different parameters work, definitely watch the compressor video, because I go into a lot more depth in that video, and they work the same way. The only difference is that they react to the sidechain signal instead of the signal of the original sound.